And so it's 10 o'clock, so we're going to get started with our next presentation. Sorry for the technical issues, we apologize. But our next presenters will discuss Census 2020 data products. Jason Devine is the Assistant Division Chief of the Census Programs area within the Population Division, excuse me. And Jason is joined by Alexandra Kraus, a survey statistician, also in the Population Division. Welcome to for joining us today.
All right, well, good morning. Thank you for having us. We're going to provide an update this morning on the demographic profile, demographic housing characteristics file, as well as the detailed demographic and housing characteristics file products. We're presenting today with my colleague, Alexandra Kraus, and I just want to check to make sure everybody can hear me and that you now are seeing my second slide.
All good.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, this first slide is just to kind of help you see where we are with our work on the 2020 data products, 2020 census data products. As most of you are probably aware, we've already released the apportionment product, which was released in April of 2021, as well as the redistricting file, which was released in August and September of 2021. We're now focused on this area that you see in the middle of the screen. Our current effort is focused on the demographic and housing characteristics file, or the DHC, and the demographic profile. And we've recently put out a series of blogs and announcements about some new dates associated with these products, and I've included those here. Our planned release date for the DHC is May of 2023. And I'll also mention just the provide the context for the products that Alexandra is going to talk about in the second half of this presentation. I've also included the detailed demographic and housing characteristics file product here because that's also part of our current effort. Based on user feedback, we've sort of renamed the detailed demographic and housing characteristics file to be more specific about the three components of that product. So we now have a detailed DHC-A, a detailed DHC-B, and a supplemental DHC. And Alexandra is going to explain what those are during her portion of the presentation. We have a planned release date for DHC-A, which is August of 2023, and the release date for the detailed DHC-B and the supplemental DHC is to be determined. And for our future effort, we will look at producing a public use microdata sample file or a PUMS file at the congressional district DHC tables. And then we'll also begin to consider how we could produce special tabulations to meet data user needs that are not met through the demographic and housing characteristics file and the detailed demographic and housing characteristics file products. So just to kind of refresh everybody about the topics that are included in the 2020 census. The 2020 census included questions on relationship to householder, sex, age, Hispanic or Latino origin, race, and housing tenure, which it asked if the housing unit was owned, rented, or occupied without payment, and vacancy status. So those are the topics that are in the census. Those are the topics that will make the tables that are part of the DHC and the detailed DHC products. If you remember that box I showed you, I included both the DHC and the demographic profile in that box because they are very closely related, those two products. The DHC is really sort of our main product for the 2020 census data products. It includes many of the demographic and housing tables that were previously included in the 2010 census summary file 1. A way to sort of keep in your mind though the differences between the DHC and the detailed DHC products is the DHC will include counts of people by relationship to householder and counts of households or families by type. But it will not include counts of people by those households or family types. So it won't include counts of people within those household or family types. That will be part of the supplemental DHC. For the DHC, geography varies with many tables provided at the census block level. I'll also mention here that all of the tables, all the data that's already been released as part of the redistricting product, those tables will all be carried forward into the DHC, and any value that was provided as part of the redistricting product will show up in the DHC product exactly as it was in the redistricting product. So there will be consistency between those two products. Any count or set of counts or tables that were provided in the redistricting data will show up exactly as they were in the redistricting data in the DHC product. And the demographic profile, it's a little different this decade. What the demographic profile has done in the past is provided critical demographic and housing characteristics from selected DHC tables, and it was done in a more streamlined, easy to use format. So in previous decades, what we were able to do is, because this was a subset of tables from the DHC, we were able to quickly put those tables together and release them so that communities would have that data sooner rather than later. But because of the way the new disclosure avoidance system works this decade, the data is not available for the demographic profile until more or less exactly the same time it's available for the DHC. So the demographic profile will go out at the same time as the DHC tables, but it will still be in a more easier to use format, in that sort of a collection of tables will be packaged together through our data dissemination tool, so you can see for a particular area the data in one profile for that community. So we did, as part of our effort to implement the new disclosure avoidance system this decade, we did look again at the contents of the DHC as it would relate to the summary file 1 product from 2010. So the initial proposal for the design and contents of the DHC was developed and shared in 2019 based on subject matter expert knowledge and feedback from a Federal Register notice. So we put our first, what we're calling the 2020 planning crosswalk, table planning crosswalk, out in 2019 for people to look at and see the tables that we were proposing. The 2010 Census Summary File 1, as I mentioned, was the starting point for the design of the DHC, with the DHC including many of the tables included in Summary File 1. And we recently had a round of feedback that we opened up to get feedback on what level of geography and what tables people needed to meet their uses of the census data. As I mentioned, we went through this initial design of the DHC. We wanted to provide people an opportunity to look and comment on that initial design, as well as some of the things we were considering to, as we went forward with our work on the disclosure avoidance system. We were thinking about maybe not producing some tables at some levels of geography. So we wanted to get feedback on the current design of the DHC before we went forward and determined the final design of the DHC. So we received comments on the initial design of the DHC, and we've come up with a series of tables that we're now planning to add back in to the DHC, and the final contents of the DHC will be reflected in the second round of DHC demonstration product. And I will talk a little bit more about the demonstration products over the next few slides. Just again, to help orient yourselves about what's included in the DHC will include counts of people by those topics that I showed you were included in the 20 census. That was sex by single year of age, Hispanic or Latino origin, by race, by sex, by age, GQ population by sex, by age, and household type by relationship to the householder. And it will include counts of households and families by multi-generational households, Hispanic or Latino origin of the householder by race of the householder, family type by presence of children, presence of people of different ages, housing tenure, and vacancy status. So you can see that just kind of reflects the data that's collected in the 2020 census. All right, so now let me talk a little bit about the DHC demonstration products. The demonstration products have been a really important way for us to get feedback from the public on the design of our new disclosure avoidance system. It allows the public to see the progress that we've been making and the level of noise that is being added by making comparisons between the published 2010 census data and the 2010 census data protected using the new disclosure avoidance methodology. So essentially what we're doing is we're taking the micro level data that was used to produce the tables from the 2010 census that's already, those tables that have already been published that are out there for the public to use. We're applying the new disclosure avoidance methodology to the microdata that's internal, and then producing new tables and putting those tables out for people to compare to the 2010 census tables that have already been released. I'll make a note here that those tables that have already been released include differences due to swapping, whereas the demonstration products don't. So when you are making those comparisons, it's not a perfect comparison to see the sort of pure impact from disclosure avoidance, but the impact from the swapping from 2010 is I think small enough where going through this exercise with the demonstration products does let you see the level of noise is being infused through this new disclosure avoidance methodology. 5 demonstration products and a production product were provided leading up to the release of the redistricting data. 2 of these included limited DHC content already. The other 3 only included the redistricting content. So the redistricting content is really basic. It's simply population counts by race and Hispanic origin for 2 age groups, 18 and over and under 18, and also counts of the population by major GQ type. But the redistricting data is made available at the block level, and as I said, that data for the DHC product will all be carried forward and will match between those 2 products. So now for the DHC, the work on the disclosure avoidance system for the DHC product, we plan 2 DHC specific demonstration products, including the demonstration product that was released in April, and then we released the unit file in April, and we provided, well, I get into that a little bit, I think, on the next slide, so I won't try and remember the dates here. And then we'll also do a production setting product for the DHC. The production setting product essentially represents, and just as it did for the redistricting product, it shows sort of the final settings of the disclosure avoidance system applied to the 2010 data. So that will reflect the exact settings for the disclosure avoidance system that will be used and then applied to the 2020 data. So that's really, I think, your best source if you want to understand the impact of the new disclosure avoidance methodology will be to look at that production setting demonstration product that we'll release. On the right-hand side of your screen, it just shows some screenshots from our webpage that provides a little bit of background, but that's also where you can find these demonstration products. This shows what I just talked about, but in a timeline format. And you can go all the way back to 2019 on the left side of the timeline, and you can see that's when we did our first demonstration product in October of 2019. We received a lot of feedback on the disclosure avoidance system at that time because the level of noise that was being infused at that early point in the design of the disclosure avoidance system was much greater than where we ended up when we ended up releasing the census redistricting product. So we made substantial improvements to the disclosure avoidance system. We also added privacy loss budget, and that eventually got us to a point where if you were to look at the redistricting production setting demonstration product, you would see pretty large improvements from that initial redistricting demonstration product that was released in 2019. You go through the timeline, you can see the different iterations. So we did a series of demonstration products for the redistricting product leading up to that production setting demonstration product, and then eventually to the 2020 census redistricting product release. So again, these the light blue demonstration products, those are with the 2010 data, and then we do the final application of disclosure avoidance and then release the 2020 product. If you go a little bit over to the right, you'll see where we get into the work on the DHC disclosure avoidance system. You'll see the demonstration product that was made available in March. The person source tables were available in March, and then the housing source tables were available in April. And I'll point out here that the comment period on both of these demonstration products is quickly coming to a close. That comment period will close on May 16th, which is next Monday. So we're looking forward to those who have been able to conduct this analysis using the demonstration products or our accuracy metrics to provide feedback on the accuracy or the noise that's being infused through the disclosure avoidance system and how that may or may not impact their use of these data. Then we'll do a second round of demonstration products in the summer. For this demonstration product, we plan to release the person and housing source tables at the same time. And then after that, we will do the production setting demonstration product, and that will move us closer to moving into production and then eventually releasing the DHC product in May of 2023. You can see at the bottom of that timeline, we have some periods built in for feedback. And throughout this entire time, we are working on tuning and improving the disclosure avoidance system. So how does this all work? I mentioned these demonstration products and how we're working with what we refer to as our disclosure avoidance science team within the Census Bureau to improve the disclosure avoidance system. We work with a series of experimental runs from the disclosure avoidance system that use 2010 census data. And then that data is provided to subject matter experts who assess the resulting accuracy from those experimental runs. We also use a re-identification study to assess the re-identification risk based on, for those different runs for a specific type of attack. Then the leading experimental run, along with the results for the accuracy analysis and re-identification study, are discussed with our Data Stewardship Executive Policy Committee, or DSEP, to obtain approval to release as the demonstration product. That product then goes out as a demonstration product. We get feedback from the public. We continue to work on tuning that product, and that eventually gets us, as we did with the redistricting product, it gets us to the final version of the disclosure avoidance system, which is then applied to the 2020 census data, and then those products are released to the public. I think we'll have, at the end of this, my presentation in Alexandra's, we should have plenty of time for questions. So if you have questions that have come up as I've gone through these different topics, we should have time to try and answer some of them at the end. So as I said, we'll have 2 rounds of DHC demonstration products for the DHC. The person table source from the person file and the unit file have already been released and they're being reviewed. The person file is released in March. We at the same time in March, we released also the accuracy metrics for the tables sourced from both the person and house unit file. So those have been out there for quite a while. And then we released the DHC demonstration product for the table sourced from the unit file in March of the 29th of March. As we had said, the public has 30 days from the release of these files to provide feedback. And because we did have an issue with the unit-based files, which we corrected, we extended the review period to May 16th, which I said is next Monday. And let's mention that this is the most extensive set of demonstration data that we've released so far for the new disclosure avoidance method. It includes 113 person file tables, 121 unit file tables, and 50 plus different geographies. So what we're doing with the demonstration products, we're essentially creating the tables that will be released as the part of the final DHC demonstration product, although this first demonstration product didn't include all the tables because, as I mentioned, based on feedback, we are adding some tables for the second round of demonstration product. But that second round of demonstration products will essentially represent exactly what we plan to release as part of the final DHC product. And the 2020 Planning Crosswalk provides information for both the DHC product and the detailed DHC product, but it will let you see exactly what tables are included in that product, at what level of geography, details about what those tables will include. So that second round of demonstration product, which will occur later in the summer, that will be the public's sort of final chance to comment on both the accuracy and the content of the plans for the DHC. Although at that point, we hope to be, through the comments and the feedback we've already received, to be fairly close to being where we want to be for the final DHC product, because we do want to move into production so that we can meet that May 2023 release date. So as I mentioned, the comments that we received on the redistricting demonstration product informed the tuning of the DAS and the setting of the privacy loss budget for that product. Now that we've moved into the work on the DHC, we've received over 400 comments so far on the contents of the DHC and detailed DHC. This was during a comment period that went from October through December of 2021. What we saw is that most uses that require basic demographic and housing information were already being broadly met by the tables that were currently proposed for the DHC. However, we did hear from some data users, some use cases where what we had prepared, what we were planning to provide as part of the DHC those needs were not being met. So we're conducting analysis to determine if a set of tables can be added back to this DHC to better meet these needs that were documented in the comments. While many of the comments did express the need for census block level data, some tables still will not be available at that level because of the impact on privacy and accuracy. While we're adding some tables back in, we're not going below what was provided for any tables, what was provided in 2010. And in some cases, we're not able to provide the same tables that were provided in summary file 1 in the DHC product because, like I mentioned, those tables that include counts of people in certain types of households or families have been moved to the detailed DHC, the supplemental DHC product. For the first round of DHC demonstration data, we want to feedback in the accuracy of the tables and the impact this has on the uses of the data. So when we were going into the early development work on the disclosure avoidance system for the DHC towards the end of last year and early this year, we were considering some different options that would have put some limitations on us as to what level we could provide some tables at. So that's why we wanted to have that feedback period to hear how not having some tables available at the block level or the track level would impact different data users' use of the census data. And we've also, at the same time that we were getting external feedback, we've continued to work to make improvements based on our own internal analysis of the results from the disclosure avoidance system through reviewing those experimental runs that I mentioned earlier. And we're in the process now of reviewing the comments we received in the first round of DHC demonstration data so they can be considered for the work leading up to the second round of DHC demonstration data. Although I will mention that at this point we've only received a few comments, and we're really hoping for the feedback to increase as we reach the end of this review period, and we hope to get still a lot more feedback on these demonstration products. Again, I'll mention the comment period for these demonstration products for the first round of demonstration products ends next Monday, May 16th. Considering the comments in the first round of DHC demonstration data and ongoing improvements informed by our internal analysis, we will use comments on the second round of DHC demonstration data to inform final improvements before DCEP, our Data Stewardship Executive Policy Committee, establishes the final settings for the disclosure avoidance system for the DHC. Okay, so we've made these demonstration products available. What are different ways that you can access and understand the level of noise that's being infused through this new disclosure avoidance methodology? Well, there's two ways. One way is through the detailed summary metrics that we released. That's by far the easiest way to get into these results and look for yourself and see the impact from disclosure avoidance system. Basically, the detailed summary metrics are released as a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. You just open up the spreadsheet and all the tables are there that provide you a number of different measures of accuracy, such as measures of bias and different measures of outliers at different levels of geography. And we've done this through all of the different demonstration products. So you can go back through and they're all available. The metrics are available for all the different demonstration products. And you can look and see the same tables through time and how they've changed. Of course, as I mentioned, those early metrics, some of them included some measures for tables that are in the DHC, but most of those early demonstration products only included the tables that were available in the redistricting data that don't include a lot of the demographic characteristics that you're interested in seeing. You can also use tabulations and maps by directly comparing the values to create tables or maps to look for the differences between the demonstration data that we've released using the 2010 data versus the published 2010 data that's already been available. That's a much more involved effort in that you have to work with the summary files that we've made available. You have to basically take those summary files and work with the technical documentation for the summary files, create the tables that you're interested in seeing, and then make comparisons between those tables with the tables that have already been released. So I'll go over some of the pros and cons of these different ways that you can look at the differences from disclosure avoidance. The detailed summary metrics, as I mentioned, they provide measures of accuracy, bias, and outliers. We use a lot of the measures that people who work with population estimates and do assessments of those estimates at the end of the decade use to compare their counts to the population, the census count. Some of those measures include like mean absolute error, mean absolute percent error, mean algebraic percent error. We also use for measures of outliers, how many geographies are above particular thresholds. I mentioned here, though, to use a lot of caution that this is a little different. The use of these measures is a little different than what you might do if you were trying to assess the accuracy of your population estimates against the census counts, where maybe you're looking at places or minor civil divisions or even counties, and you're going to be dealing with fairly large units. You know, they'll have thousands of people. Some of the smaller ones might have hundreds of people. Here, when you're making these comparisons, you're looking at a lot of cells that have either 0 people or just a very small number of people. So if you think about it, if you're starting with a cell that has, for a particular, say, age, sex, race category, you might have a lot of cells for a tract that only have 0 people in them. And if you're calculating these measures with a bunch of cells that have 0 people and disclosure protections has maybe added 1 or 2 people, you can see, whereas if you were including that in your analysis, you might get a result that sort of was inflating the impact in percentage terms or in relative terms. We look a lot when we do our analysis of the tables. We look a lot at mean absolute error. That just gives you the average numeric error that you're seeing between the two tables. And it is something that's provided for a lot of different tables in the detailed summary metrics. And for most of the tables, you'll see these mean absolute error differences are really small, like 4, 5, maybe 6, or smaller. Some of the other tables, they get a little bit larger. For some of the household type or family type tables, they can be, run around as high as like 100 or higher, sort of around that range. So a little bit higher for the unit source tables. But those are all available. I would encourage you to go look at those. If you have questions about where those are located, you can go to our disclosure avoidance webpage, and it should be easy to find there. But if you have questions, we can help you find that later. So the pros, it's a quick way to summarize across multiple experimental runs over time. It doesn't require additional data wrangling or tabulation. Cons, relative error can be misleading for small population size, which I talked about, and it doesn't really tell you the substantive importance of the differences that you're seeing. The other way to do it is through tabulations and maps that you generate yourself from the summary tables that we've released. So you produce your tables that you want to look at, and you can then compare them to the published 2010 tables. Pros, you can create custom tabulations for a particular area or value of interest. Something we haven't done much of. We tend to look at average differences across the set of a particular geography, like across tracts or counties or places. But a lot of times, those doing local demography are more interested in how the disclosure avoidance system has impacted a series or a range of estimates or census counts for a particular geography. Like they want to zero in and look and see how disclosure has impacted data for one city or a number of cities that are within their state. Gives you a clear sense of the substantive importance of the error, like how much change was there for this geography. You can create maps to see the spatial patterns. Some of the cons, you must use statistical software to read in the DHC demonstration data. You must be familiar with the technical documentation, and the tables may have changed, sourcing or universe, and you can use the crosswalk for this. And certain variables, for example, foster children, they didn't exist in the 2010 published data tables, so that limits your analysis to some degree. And one of our colleagues, Matt Spence, during the last National Advisory Committee meeting, actually went through a number of the comparisons and showed some of the maps that we've used. And I believe those, I'm not sure if it's available now, but those videos are from those advisory committee meetings are made available to the public. So if you're interested in seeing some of the analysis that we've conducted internally, it's available from that last National Advisory Committee meeting. Okay, well, that brings me to the end of my section of the presentation. So let me go back, and I think we're ready. I've stopped sharing, so I think Alexandra now can take over.
Great. Okay. Sorry. But it's not showing up on both my screens, so just give me 1 second.
Can you reshare your screen, please?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Perfect. Okay, can you see it?
We can. but it's not in presentation mode.
Okay. And then let me swap. I did one in-person meeting and then I completely forget how to do it virtually. Okay, great. So now it's in presentation mode. You can see everything?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. So I'm going to provide an update on the 2020 census, detailed DHCA, detailed DHCB, and the supplemental DHC or the SDHC. We'll start out with a little bit of background. If you're hearing these names for the first time, you might be wondering, wait, do they have new data products or tables? No, we don't. As Jason alluded to, we're just really splitting out that detailed demographic and characteristics file, or the detailed DHC. So what was formerly known as the detailed DHC is now the detailed demographic and housing characteristics file A, or detailed DHCA, the detailed demographic and housing characteristics file B, or detailed DHCB, and then the supplemental demographic and housing characteristics file, or SDHC. When we set out to propose exactly which tables would be in these data products, we relied on stakeholder feedback, review of table access rates, subject matter knowledge, while also keeping in mind the accuracy and confidentiality balance. Typically, more tables means additional privacy loss budget, particularly if there's new content. And based on data user feedback, we are prioritizing the development and the production of the detailed DHCA. So first, I just want to take a second and pause and talk a little bit about how these three data products are different than a lot of the information that you've heard about the redistricting data, the demographic profile, and the demographic and housing characteristics file, or DHC. These three data products that I'm talking about today are different because Tumult Labs, a subcontractor, is developing the algorithms compared to Census. In each data product, detailed DHCA, detailed DHCB, and supplemental DHC kind of has its own algorithm. There's no microdata requirement for these data products, which means, for example, like if you're opening up this file, instead of each row being a person, for example, each row would be a geography. So we don't have individual person level records here. For the supplemental DHC in particular, we are merging or joining the person and housing unit files. So compared to the, the previous data products, the redistricting data, demographic profile, and DHC, when you look at the person and housing files, you will see some inconsistencies between those two files. But for supplemental DHC, those tables are all about joining those files. For these data products that I'm talking about today, there's no consistency within the data product. So for example, if you're looking at the detailed DHCA and you want to get a county level estimate for a population group, you would want to go straight to that county level estimate. You wouldn't want to add up all the tracks to get that county level estimate, because when you aggregate geographies, it's going to be, it tends to be more noisy. And so same thing with population groups. If you add up all the detailed race and ethnic groups, it will not equal the total population for regional groups. And also for these products I'm talking about today, no consistency across data products. So for redistricting data, demographic profile, and the DHC, we do expect consistency. Redistricting data is being used as an input to the disclosure avoidance system when we create the DHC. But for these products, you won't see consistency, with the DHC. You wouldn't see consistency across, for example, detailed DHCA and detailed DHCB. So now, let's talk a little bit, let's focus in on these three data products. And I'm going to talk about the process at a high level because it's pretty similar for all three products. So First, as I mentioned, we identified the tables to be included in the proposal. That's kind of our initial proposal, so it's not final at that stage. Tumult Labs creates an analysis tool to assess the confidentiality and accuracy balance. What this tool does is it has parameter settings that you can turn off or on. For example, turning off or on geographies to be included in the proposal, or fill in a value, for example, the specified margin of error. So for example, at the nation level, where we could specify a margin of error plus or minus 20 of the enumerated count. And then the tool spits out, provides us the privacy loss budget associated with those parameter settings. So Tumult Labs creates that tool, and then the Census Bureau researchers develop a proposal based on analysis of that tool. Based on this initial proposal, Tumult Labs develops the disclosure avoidance system, and unique to the supplemental DHC, we execute modeling experiments that could potentially update that initial proposal. The supplemental DHC has its unique challenge because of that person, household, or unit join that I was talking about. It requires a lot larger privacy loss budget compared to other tables with similar levels of accuracy. And so for this reason, the SDHC counts will be modeled. So the modeling team will take the differentially private counts and then rely on spatial correlation in previous census and survey data to increase accuracy for those counts without increasing the privacy loss budget. But for all of these products, then next we have to test the disclosure avoidance system. Currently, we do plan to produce a proof of concept demonstration data product, which will look a little bit different than what Jason described, and get public feedback. And that might entail additional development and testing based on that public feedback. And then finally, we conduct the final production and quality assurance. One thing I'll note is that we know science is messy. This might not be exactly line by line how we do it. Sometimes we have to go back and forward. And also we engage with stakeholders and advisory committees throughout this process, as well as receiving guidance from the DCEP committee that Jason mentioned. But one thing is that for each of these products, we're a little bit, they're on a different developmental timelines. So the detailed DHCA is furthest along as we're testing the disclosure avoidance system right now. So you can see that's further along down on the slide. For detailed DHCB, we are currently assessing the tool to develop an initial proposal. And then for supplemental DHC, we are beginning to execute those modeling experiments, which again is unique to the SDHC. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about each of the products separately. Detailed DHC includes 2 tables, total population and sex by age for selected age categories. These tables are repeated by approximately 370 racial and ethnic groups, such as German, Lebanese, Jamaican, Chinese, Native Hawaiian, and Mexican, as well as approximately 1,200 detailed American Indian, Alaska Native, tribe and village populations, such as Navajo Nation. One thing that we are implementing for this is adaptive design or thresholds, where the amount of data that you get depends on your population size for a certain geography. So for example, the sex by age table, you might get total population only depending on population size, or 4 age categories, 9 age categories, or 23 categories. And you can see that breakdown of that table in the 2020 Census Data Product Planning Crosswalk that Jason mentioned. Currently, these tables are proposed for release at the nation, state, county, and American Indian and Alaska Native areas. But based on data user feedback, we're exploring the feasibility of adding place and tract. One thing to mention is that for the 2020 census, we are planning to produce more detailed race groups than ever before, but at fewer geographic levels and fewer detailed tables to balance the accuracy and confidentiality. Moving on to detailed DHCB, this slide looks pretty similar The detailed DHCB includes 2 tables, and they're also going to be repeated by those race, ethnic, and American Indian, Alaska Native tribes and villages. The difference here is the table content. We have 2 tables. One is household type that looks at, for example, family and non-family, and then housing tenure, which looks at owner or renter occupied. We continue to develop the proposal for the detailed DHCB, but our goal is to keep this product as similar to detailed DHCA as possible, including the proposed geographies. And then finally, we come to the supplemental DHC. These used to be known as the complex person household join tables, or join, because of that join or merge between the person and household files. We are proposing 8 tables for this data product, 6 which are repeated by major Hispanic origin and race groups. Those iterations are here on the slide. You have race alone, 2 or more races, Hispanic or Latino, and white alone, not Hispanic or Latino. You'll see these iterations in the DHC, as well as those other data products that Jason talked about. These tables are not repeated or iterated by detailed race, ethnicity, and American Indian, Alaska Native tribes and villages. So one thing that I wanted to mention about the supplemental DHC, because when you look at the 2020 Census Data Product Planning Crosswalk, when you're looking at those table shells, some of the table shells look a little similar to the DHC, but there's an important difference here. On the DHC person file, you would get counts of people. So for example, counts of spouses. On the DHC unit file, you would get counts of households. So counts of married couple households. But for their supplemental DHC, which you see on screen, and I've put it in bold, you get population and households, which means you get the count of people living in a married couple household. For the SDHC proposed geographies for the tables that are not repeated by race ethnicity, we are proposing nation, state, county, tract, and place, and then select tables available at the American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian areas, and block group level. For tables that are repeated by Hispanic origin and race, we are proposing those tables at the nation, state, county, and tract level. One thing with the supplemental DHC is we plan to implement a household truncation threshold to balance that privacy confidentiality. I wanted to leave with my last slide about public feedback, which has been extremely helpful when developing these proposals. So thank you for providing your feedback on these data products. Based on the 2020 Census Data Product Planning Crosswalk, where we requested feedback in December of 2021, data users identified a critical need for these tables. These tables are used by a broad population of users for a wide array of purposes. And many of these purposes cannot be predicted in advance, including the spread of COVID-19. We heard a lot of data user feedback on geography. For detailed DHC A and B, we heard a need for place and census tract, which is why we are looking at the feasibility of adding those geographies back into these data products. For supplemental DHC, we got feedback on school districts and census tract are lower, which is why you still see census tract and, when possible, block group data available for the supplemental DHC. Based on data user feedback from this call, we are prioritizing total population counts for the detailed DHCA. And we continue to engage with our stakeholders and partners, and we continue to look forward to your feedback and your questions.
Thanks, Alexandra. Before we open it up for questions, I just wanted to go quickly over, kind of summarize the data products that we talked about today. We talked about the demographic and housing characteristics file, which is, like I said, one of our main 2020 products. That includes many of the tables included in summary file 1 from 2010. We also talked about the demographic profiles, which will include a subset of tables from the demographic and housing characteristics file, but in an easier to use format. Alexandra talked about the DHCA file, which with a product that includes counts of population for many different detailed race and ethnic groups, such as German, Lebanese, Jamaican, and Chinese, Native Hawaiian, Mexican, as well as about 100 or 1,200 detailed American Indian, Alaska Native, tribal, and village population groups, such as Navajo Nation. Alexandra also talked about the DHCB, which would include some household type and tenure information tables for those same detailed race groups. And then finally, we talked about the supplemental DHC, which would include tables that provide characteristics about households and counts of the people living in those different types of households and family types. So that's what we covered in a nutshell. We're able to take questions, right? So I'm not sure how we want to do it. I don't see any questions in the chat, but.
No, not yet. If anyone has any questions, if they, yes, would please use the Q&A to enter their questions. I do want to ask Jason and Alexandra, because there's so much detailed information in your slides, and we thank you for that, would you be able to make those available to us so that we can post them on our site for our data users?
We can. We can provide some set of slides. These are a lot of the slides we use are slides we previously used for a advisory committee meeting. So we'll just have to talk and see what is the best way to make those slides available to you. But we can make some set of slides, and I think that's for people who are looking to stay kind of informed about where we are and the work on the data products. It's a lot to cover in an hour. You know, we could take. We've done several workshops where we've taken half a day to cover these same things, same material. There's a lot available through our website. The best way to get there is just to go to our main census page and type in disclosure avoidance, and it takes us to our disclosure avoidance page. And to read through those different items that are available there, and that should bring you up to speed. We've done a number of sort of press releases as well as blogs. We just recently did blogs that put out some dates for the release of the DHC and detailed DHCA, so those are available. And then there's also this 2020 DAS at census.gov email box that you can send questions or comments to us through, and we try to respond to those fairly quickly. And right now we haven't, the feedback we've received through that inbox has been fairly light. So if you have questions, I mean, that's a way to get them to us and to get a response. Or for those of you who are would like to, feel free to reach out to myself or Alexandra directly, and we'll try to answer your questions.
Excellent. Yes, I was going to provide a link to the website and to the planning crosswalk file that Alexandra mentioned to our data users, those who registered for the event, you know, when we send our follow-up.
That'd be great
for today's event. So thank you. And yes, I'll also include that email that you mentioned.
Okay.
If you don't mind, we're just going to wait a minute or two more to see if we get any questions through the Q&A.
Jen, I'll jump in with a question while we wait for more. And this could be for Jason or Alexandra. I think since there is such a density of information in these slides, for someone who's working at a more local level, what do you think? What would you like the main takeaway to be for, you know, how they view the 2020 data, what their expectation should be versus what they've seen in the past?
Well, I can answer it, but then I'll also give Alexandra a chance to add to that. I think there's been a lot of discussion about the new disclosure avoidance methodology. That's been a concern by a lot of data users of how that was going to impact the products. Those of you who are working at a local level and don't plan to, you know, engage in an analysis using the summary files that we provided, but are still, and I think we all should be to some degree interested in the impact the disclosure avoidance method will have on the final 2020 census data as it's released. The detailed summary metrics, just a really easy way to get into that. And you can open that Excel spreadsheet. If you're only interested in population totals, you can look real quickly and you can see the very minimal impact that this disclosure avoidance method is having on those counts for even small levels of geography. You get into other tables, more detailed tables. You know, if that's you want to get in the more, if those are the tables you use, some of those tables are available in the detailed summary metrics. In some cases, you'd have to work with the summary files yourself. Bottom line message, though, is we're all working really hard to get this disclosure avoidance methodology as good as it can be before we release the final data, because that's the data you'll be working with throughout the next decade. And you know, we I think went through the same process with the redistricting data that's out there now. People are using it. It's fit for use for the redistricting purposes and other purposes. So we're going to continue to work through the feedback we receive through these demonstration products to improve the disclosure avoidance system for the DHC, and then we will go into production mode and produce those tables and get the DHC product out to the public to start using.
Great, yeah, I can provide a few takeaways from my presentation in particular. I think one is that we haven't talked too much about these other data products. We've really been focused in on apportionment redistricting and DHC. And so we're really just trying to get people familiar with these tables and the proposal and seeking feedback. If you have any feedback on these products, please use that email to send us feedback there. The detailed DHC A and B, although we'll be providing a lot more data for those detailed groups, there is less tables and geographies available. And for the supplemental DHC, we included as many of those complex person household join tables as possible, but the challenge there is that they require high levels of privacy loss budget, so we're now implementing modeling.
Thank you. We do have an additional question that asks, is there an expected release date for urban rural information?
So the urban rural designation is something that the standards are reviewed and put in place each decade. That work has been going on, and at this point, because of the timing of the release, the planned release for the DHC, we expect those urban rural designations to be made in time to include that as part of the DHC release. So those designations for the tables that are provided by urban rural in the DHC should be available in time to include that as part of the DHC product in May of 2023.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any additional questions. I do want to say a big thank you to both Jason and Alexandra for joining us today. And again, if you will provide us with some slides, we will make those, and then the links to the website and the email address available to our data users in our follow-up email.
Well, thank you
very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
You too.
Thanks.
And for all of our attendees, we're going to take a short break and we will start our next session at 11. Thank you. So welcome back, everyone. Our next presenter is Nicole Scaniello. She is the Assistant Division Chief for Communications in the American Community Survey Office. So she's going to be sharing information about the ACS with us. Welcome, Nicole, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone, for having me. Let's first start with trying to share my screen. Let's hope I can do this correctly. So first, you're going to see my dog. That will disappear in just a second. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, and hopefully not my speaker notes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for having me here. Again, my name is Nicole Scaniello. I'm the Assistant Division Chief for Communications in the American Community Survey Office. So today I am going to talk to you first. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the ACS, but I will give a brief introduction to the ACS. Then I'll talk about the impact of COVID-19 on our 2020 ACS data collection operations and data quality. Then I'll talk about our 2020 ACS one-year experimental data release and our 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year standard data release. And then I'll conclude with some information about our 2022 content test and some data user resources and engagement. So the American Community Survey, or the ACS, is the nation's most current, reliable, and accessible data source for local statistics on critical planning topics such as age, children, veterans, commuting, education, and employment. Obviously, we have much more content. The ACS samples approximately 3.5 million addresses each year. These data are collected continuously throughout the year to produce annual social, economic, housing, and demographic estimates. The data collected through the ACS are used to inform the distribution of more than $675 billion of federal government spending each year. Our estimates, covering more than 40 topics, support more than 300 known federal uses and countless non-federal uses. The Census Bureau typically releases 3 different sets of ACS estimates each year in the form of 1-year and 5-year period data sets, as well as 1-year supplemental estimates. I think many of you know our release was different this year due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'll share more details about that today. The typical ACS data collection strategy includes multiple modes, including internet, mail, telephone, and personal visit. For most housing units, the first phase includes a mailed request to respond online, followed later by an option to complete a paper questionnaire and return it by mail. If no response is received by mail or internet, or if a household refuses to participate, the address may be selected for a personal visit during what we call our non-response follow-up phase of data collection. The ACS uses a multi-mode data collection strategy with multiple mailings in order to get responses from all segments of the population. The ACS includes 12 monthly independent samples. Data collection for each sample spans 3 months, with mail and internet returns accepted during the entire period. And the process operates in continuously overlapping cycles so that during any given month, we have 3 separate panels occurring. 2 samples are in the mail internet phase, and 1 is in the personal visit non-response follow-up phase. Respondents are always able to call our telephone questionnaire assistance line at any point during that 3-month data collection cycle if they have questions about the survey or if they prefer to complete the survey over the phone. When the pandemic hit, we had to temporarily stop many of our operations in order to comply with national, state, and local health guidelines and to protect our staff and ACS survey respondents. We rely on our National Processing Center in Indiana to print, assemble, and mail survey invitations. They also capture data from completed forms and provide telephone support for people who respond. And most of that work cannot be done virtually, so local stay-at-home orders and the need for social distancing created substantial disruptions. We suspended our mail operations in mid-March of 2020 and ultimately canceled the mailouts for the April, May, and June panels. From July 2020 through March of 2021, we mailed survey materials using a revised strategy. We were able to return to our full 5-piece mailing strategy in April of 2021. The internet option was always available. However, due to the lack of mailings from April through June of 2020, most of our sample addresses didn't know they were in the ACS until we got to that non-response follow-up operation, which is a subsample of the full monthly sample. In-person interviewing for housing units and group quarters, and so group quarters are facilities such as nursing homes, college dorms, and prisons, was suspended from mid-March through June of 2020. Our field representatives conducted telephone interviews for housing units when we had a phone number available, and the regional offices mailed letters to non-responding addresses to encourage respondents to complete the survey online or call the census field representative to complete an interview over the phone. Personal visits resumed for some areas in July and for all areas without stay-at-home orders in September. Given the access issues we encountered for group quarters facilities, we used administrative records from the Bureau of Prisons for that particular population. Ultimately, the data collection challenges we faced during the pandemic impacted ACS data quality. As I mentioned before, the ACS uses a multi-mode data collection strategy with multiple mailings in order to get responses from all segments of the population. And so due to the limitations in our data collection and our inability to fully utilize all three data collection modes during the pandemic, we were unable to collect information from certain segments of the population. The people who did respond to the survey had significantly different social, economic, and housing characteristics from those who didn't, resulting in non-response bias in the data. So for example, people who responded to the 2020 ACS tended to have higher income, higher education, and were more likely to own their home. While all surveys have non-response bias, our standard methods for mitigating the non-response bias were insufficient for this data year. Due to the non-response bias, the Census Bureau implemented an alternative weighting methodology, which is called entropy balance weighting, to attempt to reduce the non-response bias in the 2020 one-year data. We ultimately released 2020 ACS one-year experimental data products, which I will talk about more in a couple slides. We also delayed the release of the 2016 to 2020 ACS five-year data in order to refine our methodology to minimize the impact of the non-response bias on the five-year estimates. This slide shows the materials and products we released as part of the 2020 ACS one-year experimental release. The analytical report we released in October describes how the pandemic disrupted ACS data collection in 2020 and gives data users insights into why we decided to release 2020 ACS one-year estimates as an experimental product. The technical working paper we released in November describes the experimental weighting methodology used to produce the experimental estimates. And then, of course, we released the experimental estimates and a public use microdata sample, or PUMS file, in November of 2021, which I'll discuss in more detail in the next slide. The 2020 ACS one-year experimental release includes 54 tables, similar in format to the ACS one-year supplemental tables. So if you are familiar with our supplemental table IDs, those are K tables. The format is similar for the experimental tables. The tables cover social, economic, housing, and demographic characteristics and are available for the nation, states, and the District of Columbia. The experimental methodology does not apply to Puerto Rico, so experimental estimates were not released for Puerto Rico. And as I mentioned earlier, we released a technical working paper detailing the methodology for the experimental weights used for the release. And the estimates were produced using a methodology called entropy balance weighting that was developed for the Current Population Survey Annual Social and Economic Supplement, or the CPS ASEC. Entropy balancing uses additional information such as decennial census, administrative, and third-party data to adjust the survey weights to make the data more representative of the entire population. The technical working paper includes a limited set of 2019 and 2020 ACS estimates with the experimental weighting methods applied to help data users understand the impact of the methods on weights in a non-pandemic year to provide context for year-to-year comparisons. And finally, we also released the 2020 ACS one-year PUMS files with experimental weights. And if you're not familiar with PUMS, ACS PUMS files enable data users to create custom estimates and tables that are not available through our pre-tabulated products, like those that are available in data.census.gov. All of the products from the experimental release can be found on the experimental data page on the American Community Survey website, and I've included the URL at the bottom of this slide. And I should note that the data tables and the PUMS files are not available in data.census.gov or in the Census Bureau's Application Programming Interface, or API. So this slide shows you a couple screenshots from our ACS website where you can find the experimental data release. You can find the data and supporting information by going to census.gov/ACS and you'll click on data on the left-hand side, and then again, you'll click on experimental data. And the page contains links to several blogs we've released discussing the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on our 2020 ACS data collection operations. It includes our schedule for data releases and additional resources. So now I'll cover some guidance about using the 2020 ACS one-year experimental estimates. The Census Bureau encourages data users to determine whether the data are suitable for their particular use. The Census Bureau does not recommend comparing the 2020 ACS one-year experimental estimates with our standard ACS estimates or the decennial census, or comparing the 2020 one-year PUMs that we released with the experimental weighting, comparing those to standard PUMs estimates or with pre-tabulated products. Experimental data should be used with caution because they may not meet all of our quality standards. So again, that entropy balance weighting could only adjust for some of the non-response bias in those estimates. In addition, estimates for public use microdata areas, or PUMAs, should be used with caution because the experimental weights were not optimized to produce estimates for these areas. Okay, now shifting to the 5-year, as I mentioned before, we delayed the 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year release in order to refine our methodology in order to minimize the impact of the non-response bias on the 5-year estimates. On March 17th, we released our standard 5-year data products down to the block group level. And the 5-year PUMS files and the variance replicate estimates were released on March 31st. Before I talk in more detail about the 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year estimates, I want to talk about 5-year estimates in general. I think they're just important points to keep in mind when looking at these estimates. So all ACS estimates are period estimates, and period estimates describe the characteristics of an area over a specific time period, not a single point in time, like the decennial census. In the case of ACS one-year estimates, the period is 12 months. The estimates in the 5-year release are pulled together across 60 months to create the 5-year data. And 5-year estimates are not an average of the 1-year ACS estimates. The 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year data describe the population and housing characteristics from January 1st, 2016 through December 31st, 2020. After the data are pulled together, they are updated with the geographic boundaries of the last year of the period, so in this case 2020, and then assigned the appropriate weights to produce population and housing estimates. Weights are adjusted using the population and housing totals controlled for age, sex, race, and Hispanic origin, which are derived from the Census Bureau's population estimates program. Also, income and dollar estimates are then adjusted for inflation based on the most recent year of the period. So the latest 5-year estimates are adjusted to $2020. And the link at the bottom of the slide will take you to a recently released blog all about ACS period estimates. So now I'd like to talk specifically about the 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year estimates. Given the presence of the increased non-response bias in the 2020 data, we delayed our 5-year release in order to refine the methodology. The ACS 5-year housing unit weighting was modified to enhance our ability to mitigate the non-response bias present in the ACS data collected in 2020. We incorporated entropy balance weighting, or EBW, into our standard production methodology. The goal was to leverage the EBW to reduce the bias in the 2020 portion of the 5-year data, but keep our standard methodology intact as much as possible to support producing estimates for all of our standard 5-year geographies. The 2020 ACS 1-year experimental estimates had a larger proportion of the data impacted by the non-response bias, whereas the 5-year estimates contained 4 other years of data. So proportionally, the 2020 data had less impact on the 2016 to 2020 5-year estimates. I also want to note that we further enhanced the EBW methodology for the 5-year estimates. We included additional population controls at smaller geographies. We used additional administrative data, and we adjusted the weights to make key estimates consistent with estimates from prior ACS releases and year-to-year changes from the experimental files. We partially processed the data from 2016 to 2019 using our standard methodology before combining those data with the data processed using the EBW methodology. So just to clarify, we did not apply EBW to the entire 5-year period. It was applied to the 2020 portion of the data and was then incorporated into our standard weighting methodology. Once the data from 2016 to 2020 were pulled together, we applied population and housing unit control totals. And if you're interested in more details, there's more information in the user note, which is the first URL at the bottom of the slide, the technical working paper, and the accuracy of the data document. And I've also included those URLs at the bottom of the slide. Since we just crossed over a decennial census year, I'd like to touch on geography and population controls for the recent 5-year release. The ACS typically publishes estimates using the latest available geographic boundaries, which are also referred to as vintages. Many geographic areas, such as tracts and block groups, will use 2020 census boundaries. There are some exceptions with geographies reflecting 2010 census boundaries, and this is typical for our sort of cadence in making these geographic updates after we cross over a decennial census. We're planning to publish updated boundaries for zip code tabulation areas, or ZICTAs, with the 2021 ACS release, and updated boundaries for PUMAs and urban rural definitions with the 2022 ACS release. And this is the same schedule we followed after the 2010 census. Switching to population controls, the 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year estimates use the vintage 2020 post-census estimates. Post-census, I cannot say the word. Post-census estimates are produced for the years after a decennial census when only the beginning population is known. So the vintage 2020 estimates are based on the 2020 census and were created without the incorporation or consideration of the 2020 census results. Given these changes for this release, I want to talk about some guidance for using the 5-year data. Data users should use caution when comparing the 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year estimates with other ACS data or 2020 census data. If you plan to make comparisons, we encourage you to compare 5-year estimates to 5-year estimates and to make comparisons with only non-overlapping data. In this case, you would want to compare the 2016 to 2020 5-year estimates with the 2011 to 2015 5-year estimates. Given the data collection challenges we encountered in 2020, the ACS collected only 2/3 of the responses it usually collects in a survey year. And this reduced the number of interviews in the 2020 portion of the 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year estimates. So that caused an increase in the margins of error by approximately 15 to 20% in relative terms. Data users should take the margins of error into account when making comparisons, especially for smaller geographies or populations, and use caution when using estimates with high margins of error. That's pretty standard guidance in any data release, but given that increase in margin of error, it's important to note here. There are also, so when I talked about period estimates, there are several challenges in making comparisons with the 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year estimates, including those changes to the weighting methodology, actual changes within the population and our ability to capture those changes within that 5-year period, the tendency of multi-year estimates to smooth out sudden changes, and the fact that the ACS population controls were not informed by the 2020 census results, and therefore you may notice differences between the ACS estimates and 2020 census totals. As I wrap up discussing the 2020 ACS data releases, I want to share some useful recorded webinars with transcripts if you're looking for even more information. They are part of our press kits, which also contain helpful links to press releases, blogs, and more. We had a webinar in late July about how COVID-19 impacted our data collection operations for the 2020 ACS and what that meant for our data products. We also hosted a webinar when we released the one-year experimental estimates to go over how to access the experimental data and some more details about the methodology behind it. And finally, we hosted a pre-release webinar before the 5-year release to preview users on what to expect. I've covered some of the content from these various presentations here, but I did want to point these out in case you are interested in going back and hearing any of those full webinars. We just covered a lot of material with what happened with the 2020 data releases. So now I want to switch gears and highlight some of the other activities from the ACS program. In its efforts to ensure better data, the Census Bureau periodically reviews the content of the ACS to ensure the survey stays relevant as society changes and federal agency data needs evolve. And this process is called a content test. The test is conducted approximately every 5 years to improve the quality of existing questions or test the addition of new questions. As you can see, we are almost in the middle of the current content test. The test cognitive testing operation began in 2020, and the field testing operation will begin in September of 22. Results from the test will be implemented in the 2025 production cycle, so the 2025 ACS. The content test is testing 11 topics, including 6 person-level topics and 5 housing-level topics. The person-level topics are household roster, educational attainment, health insurance coverage, disability, means of transportation to work, and income. And the housing level topics include sewer, electric vehicles, home heating fuel, solar panels, and homeowners association fees. We love engaging with our data users, and we love hearing and using their feedback to improve our program. So I want to highlight a relatively new resource created in response to data user feedback. We recently created a new page on our website called Using American Community Survey Data with Open Source Software. And this is a great resource for data users who don't have access to statistical software packages such as SAS and Stata. On this page, we highlight some popular libraries and packages and provide links to external documentation pages to learn more. It's a simple solution for now, but our ultimate goal for 2022 is to create a repository where data users can contribute their own code that they've created using these tools. If you have any suggestions for an open source package or a library we can include, please feel free to email us at acso.users.support@census.gov. I include that contact information on my contact slide, so you'll have that. In addition to providing materials to assist our data users, we also hold webinars throughout the year. We have some webinars coming up, which are a great opportunity to learn more about using ACS data and have an opportunity to ask questions. Don't worry if you are unable to attend a webinar. We provide recordings of every event and post them on our events page, which you can find at the URL listed at the bottom of the slide. Before I wrap up my presentation, I want to make sure you are aware of our online ACS Data Users Group. The purpose of the ACS Data Users Group is to improve the understanding of the value and utility of the ACS data and to promote information sharing among data users about key ACS data issues and applications. The Data Users Group has over 3,600 members and is growing every month. If you haven't joined, we would love for you to become part of the community. The website contains information such as previous conference presentations, archived webinars, and the discussion forum allows members to share messages, materials, tips, and announcements related to the ACS. Census Bureau staff are members, and we also share program updates in the forum. We also host ACS Data Users conferences, typically every 2 years, in order to provide an opportunity for ACS data users and Census Bureau staff to showcase their work and exchange information about their experiences using ACS data. And the most recent conference was held in May of 2021. The conferences are open to the public, and information is posted in advance on the Data Users Group website. So for all of these, for the events, the Data Users Group itself, membership is free and it's open to all interested data users. So to learn more, you can go to acsdatacommunity.prb.org, listed at the bottom of the screen. And with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to take a minute or two to wait and see if we get any questions from our group. And while we do that, I just wanted to mention to everyone that Nicole, you did provide your slides, and I wanted to thank you for that. So we will be posting them to our conference site and making them available. And thank you for including all of those links for our users. It'll make it a lot easier for them to access that information. So just checking to see. Okay, we do have a question in the chat. It's quite long, so bear with me. Or actually in the Q&A. I don't know, can you see the Q&A, Nicole?
Oh, that looks actually like a new feature. Let me see. Okay. Would you like me to read it? I was going to say it'll help me digest the question. So I'll do my best. Let's see.
Thank you.
Okay, so from Jake Michael, I am gathering data for social equity / racial justice research. The ACS provides block group level data for race, ethnicity for persons, and also on poverty for persons, but it does not give persons in poverty by race. The information would be very valuable, but I was told by the census staff that it cannot be distributed for privacy reasons. It is frustrating that we cannot locate neighborhoods, aka block groups with low income people of color. If we cannot locate them, that hampers our ability to target services to assist them. Seems like a catch-22. I was able to find municipal level data by household, which has income levels by race. That was somewhat helpful, but it seems like the existing Census Bureau practices are limiting our ability to do rigorous research on social justice, which is a very pressing issue. Do you have any thoughts on this? So I need to digest this a little bit. In terms of what we have available, I hate to put her on the spot, but I do have my colleague Gretchen Gooding, who is the chief of our outreach and education branch. Gretchen, does anything come to mind? I just wonder if that's exhausted all of the resources we do have available, because I know we do have very detailed data by race and Hispanic origin information that comes out every 5 years in our selected population tables. And then we have sort of a complementary product called our American Indian Alaska Native tables. Those are far more detailed than our typical 5-year release. But of course, we do have to apply disclosure protections to ensure the privacy and confidentiality of the information that's been given to us. Gretchen, do you have anything to add in terms of what's available?
Yeah, I was looking in data.census.gov. I mean, you're right. I'm not seeing anything when I add, poverty, and then I start filtering at the block group level. I don't see anything that's broken out by race for ACS. So I was looking at SAPI, but I'm not super familiar with what they have available. I don't think I see it broken out by race. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, what we can do though, Jake, is if you are interested, if you write to the ACSO user support line that is monitored daily by Gretchen's staff, we have connections with the subject matter experts, and we could put you in touch with the subject matter experts who work on income or poverty by race, in case they could walk you through what they know is available in case we are missing something.
Thank you so much for that. If you don't mind just waiting another minute or two to see if we get any additional questions.
Well, while we're waiting for something to queue up, I'll just throw out there, I'll just clarify, because I feel like this question has come up a lot. And first, I want to thank all of you as partners that work with data users across the country. We really appreciate it and absolutely love the work you do. I think there's a misconception regarding the 5-year estimates that we took the 2020 ACS one-year experimental estimates and just plopped those in there. And hopefully my presentation made that clear. But I think if there's anything that I'd want you to walk away with is to know that we did more. We did not just insert the experimental estimates. We refined that methodology and incorporated it, like I said, into our standard weighting methodology. So those 5-year estimates are considered production estimates. It's really complicated. And I tried to cover that in my guidance because when you think about even specific topics, this was something we put out in our press release, even thinking about income, it's a 5-year period and income was higher in a lot of areas from the 16 to 19 period. And then you throw in the pandemic and there, you know, obviously we were not able to eliminate all non-response bias. We've been very transparent about that, but did the best we could to reduce the impact of that. So that's why we're providing all that guidance. It is just a very different year, but those 5-year estimates are standard estimates. On the other hand, the experimental estimates, I would say if you typically rely on those or you have a data user who does, and they just have like a time series going, I would not recommend just putting those data in and then just saying, that's great. We got our, you know, they only go to the state level. So in some aspects for people's work, it's not going to meet some needs anyway. You're not going to get that sub-state geography. But I would really encourage people to look at them a little more carefully if you typically rely on those. Because like I said, they don't necessarily meet all of the quality standards because they are experimental. So I hope that's helpful because I know it's been difficult for SDCs to try and communicate all of this out to their networks. We do have a lot of resources, so I hope those links are helpful, but we are here to help. So if you have a question, please feel free to contact us.
So yes, thank you, Nicole. That information is very helpful. And we have had that question from many data users. And I think we may have discussed in one of our meetings that in some cases, there's a legislative requirement for agencies to use the most recent data available. So, you know, as they're using it, we're just cautioning them to be sure that, as you noted, that they are reviewing the margins of error and doing those comparisons back to the non-overlapping, most recent non-overlapping 5-year period to get a better understanding of the data. So yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
That's great. And I did note in my presentation, we just released another user note that provides a little more detail about the use of that entry balance weighting. And I'm going to communicate with our partners here at the Census Bureau who work with the SDCs to make sure that information gets communicated out, because I think that is a helpful resource. We just released it the other day, so I haven't had a chance to get the email out to everyone.
Great, thank you. We don't seem to have any additional questions at this time. So I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us today. And we will post the slides and encourage people, if they have any additional questions, to send them through the account.
Great, you are so welcome, and thank you for having me. Again, I appreciate all the work you all do, and if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Great, thank you so much. And
Right.
We're going to take a break for a little break now, and we will start back up at noon with Kaneen Reese from Census. She'll be showing us the data.census.gov tool and giving us some tips on using that. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your patience. And I would like to introduce our final presenter, Kaneen Reese. She is the Chief of the Dissemination Outreach Branch of the Census Bureau. And Kaneen is responsible for communication and outreach efforts on the Census API, the microdata access tool, and data dissemination platform data.census.gov. Kaneen has joined us in previous years, so we want to thank her for returning, to provide us information and updates about these important tools. So welcome back, Kaneen, and thank you again for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm always happy to be back at the Pennsylvania data conferences. We appreciate it. So first off, I just wanted to go through a few things. I think most people have seen the site. And so I just wanted to go over in the last year, we've definitely had some changes. Hopefully there are improvements, but definitely changes with the navigation. So I'm just going to go through certain things showing you how to do things in different ways of searching, from the single search to the advanced search, then kind of a connection of the two using both the single search bar and the advanced search. And then also doing some things like comparing across time and geographies, then moving down to finding business data, using kind of the NAICS survey, searching by industry with the NAICS, using a zip code. I can also show you just in Pennsylvania, but just show kind of the breadth of the NAICS data that we have. Then I'm going to kind of switch over and talk about our microdata access. Now, this is our public use file tool that helps you create custom tabulation. So going through and showing you all these different ways of accessing data. And if you still can't find what you're looking for, maybe you need something a little bit more precise, or it's just not tabulated, using the microdata access is a great way. And just showing you two examples of that and talking a little bit about that, leaving it with resources and how you can find additional information. So I'm just going to kind of kick it off from there. All right, so let me go to my next slide. All right, so the first one is getting started using a single search bar. So the first thing what we wanted to do was find some decennial tables using Reading, Pennsylvania, and then also look at the geographic profile. So the big key is me remembering those examples and then switching over. So let me go back over here, right here, and going to data.census.gov. From here, I'm just going to use the single search bar, and I'm going to put in Reading, PA. I can just put that in and click enter. And then you can see, actually, let me adjust my screen just a little bit so you might be able to see it a little bit better. From here, this takes us to our advanced search, our all results page, where you see the different types of ways that you can view data. Because we just put down a geography, so I don't know 100% which, it doesn't know what I'm looking for specifically. So it's trying to give me what it thinks might be helpful. So general population estimates, and then you can see tables. And you can scroll down, you see that there's 3,152 tables that all are based with that geography. And then you can scroll down and see more of the maps, or up here you can see the different tabs for things that are available. On the far right, we have our geographic profile that I know that y'all have seen. It's just a little different the way that it's been shown. So I wanted to show you really, really quickly, showing what's available. Scroll down and see the things we now have. The basic estimates. We're still waiting to get the hover feature to show you where it's being sourced from. So I know that's an issue, but it does include kind of what estimates we would are most popular, and then also what we would offer up to people. So our latest would be the 2020 decennial data, where possible we are including that, and then other things like median household income or maybe bachelor's degree or higher is going to be based on, American Community Survey and that type of thing. So going down, you can just see some visualizations, very similar to another product we have on census.gov called Quick Facts. So those things are available if you want to check it out. So one thing I like, and I'll always, just a reminder, if you click on this logo here, it's going to take you back to the landing page. So one of the things too is that with single search bars, not only if you wanted Reading, but then you could also put something like redistricting. If you were looking for, if I spell it right, hold on one second, redistricting, or even Census 2020, something that pulls up what you are looking for. Now I put redistricting and it shows the 6 tables that are available for redistricting, which is perfect and ideal of what I'm looking for. So different ways of kind of using the single search bar. I got to be honest, using American Fact Finder for so long, I'm so used to those filters. But once I started using the single search, it was really kind of easy to go in and start using it, especially just giving a one geo and maybe a topic or something like that. So anyway, all right, I'm going to clear it and then we're going to go to the next question. All right, the next question is getting using the advanced search. The advanced search is our faceted filter experience. So I wanted to show a couple of things that are available with that. So bypassing the search, and we're just going to go to those drop downs using 2020 redistricting data, and we're going to go to all counties in Pennsylvania. Of course, with the census coming out, redistricting last August and September, and we're waiting patiently to have the latest census data to be released. So just kind of showing you where using the redistricting data where I can, just to kind of familiarize yourself. All right, so we're looking for 2020 redistricting data for all counties in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to click over here. And then from here, I'm going to go to the advanced search. So I can either use this drop down here or this link right here to advanced search. It's kind of small, so definitely just making sure that you're aware that it's there. So from here, it tells us, it gives us this filter panel. It's definitely some changes from the last time. A couple things we wanted to look for. So I'm going to look for redistricting. So I'm actually going to go straight to surveys and click on decennial census. Lots of different options here because I don't have a year in. So I could go down and click on this redistricting data from here. And then I can go in and do my geography. You see that it's been populated here on the left-hand side, kind of like that data basket that's available at an American Fact Finder. Now I'm going to go to geography. So some of our geography has been updated. The end in December of last year, we made some more look and feel changes to things. It still has kind of the same functionality, but it kind of calls out some summary levels that people use most often. So I'm looking for county, so I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go down to Pennsylvania. And then I'm going to click our collection of geography, what we call a pseudo geography of the all counties. And if you've been with us over the years, you know it's kind of painfully we've been adding these pseudo geographies or these collections of geographies that are so important to so many people, so you don't have to individually click everything. But that's one we've had for a while, but we've been continuing to include those, and especially being able to add them when we're looking at decennial data as well. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and search and see my search results. If you scroll down, we actually have 10, and that's because we're including 2020 as well as 2010 and then 2000. So if I wanted to go in and just see 2020, I can go to this years tab and then I can just choose 2020 and you see it being added in the back. You see kind of movement in the back, and that's when the panel's being updated. So from here, you can kind of shut that and then see that it's just the 6 tables that are available. And then I'm just going to take a look at a few. So I wanted to look at race. So I'm going to click on that. With it, you might see that you don't have a ton of areas. You can, make things smaller, but our tables are really big. So if you'd like to go ahead and just collapse these filters, that's a great way to do it, and be able to see more. And of course, if you're looking at all counties in Pennsylvania, you're still going to have to scroll some, but at least it kind of gives you a little bit better way of accessing things. So from here, I'm just going to scroll down and look and see what I have available. With the redistricting data for race, you're looking at those basic races, and then the races in addition. So white and maybe black or African American. So population of 2 races, and then you scroll down and you have population of 3 races. So different things that are available from there. What I'm going to focus on, we talked about P1. Now I'm going to go and I want to look at Hispanic 2, and that's not on race. So I'm going to go over here and go to see what I have available with redistricting. So I have occupation, occupancy status, and then I've got Hispanic or Latino, or not Hispanic or Latino by race. That sounds kind of what I'm interested in and exactly what I'm looking for. I want the Hispanic or Latino population. These are just the straight counts. It's not giving you the percentages or anything like that. So just be aware with that, with these straight redistricting numbers. All right, so definitely interested in P2, which is the Hispanic or Latino, and definitely interested in P1, which is race. So I think that's going to lead me into my next question, where one of the great things, let's switch to the next thing. One of the great things about being able to use a site like data.census.gov, even though it's still developing and we're still getting your feedback, is finding something is to be able to have single estimates that can then be mapped. So part of why we've had this big transfer over is to allow everything to be part of the API. That allows for dashboards. I know that y'all have some great dashboards at the State Data Center, all coming in through these single estimates of the API. Same with data.census.gov. We also look at things through tables display so that you kind of see both. But what I really like is using, for some of these more complex geographies, or definitely the smaller geographies, using the mapping features to find it. So I'm just going to looking at tables P1 and P2 because I'm interested in race and Hispanic origin for a block in Monroe County, and using the map feature to kind of find this, because if you know your block number, it would be fantastic to hear about that. I honestly don't know anybody that does unless they have just recently looked it up. It's not something readily available, so a mapping feature is something that really, really helps. So let me scoot over. I'm going to go ahead and clear this up. And I'm going to go, this is a great way, if you know your table IDs, which some of us really do, we know our table IDs and we don't want to change them. If you know it, and we don't have to change that. If you know them, go ahead and put them in. I think that it's not going. Okay, here we go. P1 and then P2. And then I click enter and it shows these two tables that are coming up. I could access that and then go to the geography, however I want to do, but instead I want to find my geography with the maps. So I'm going to switch over to maps and let me show you a few little tricks that I like to do a lot. So I'm going to go to layer and click on layer, and I'm going to scroll down to census block. So this is giving us the layer of the shapefile that's being returned. Next, I'm going to go to base map because I want details. I want to be able to see the street signs and the highways so I have a better sense of where I am. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit because I'm in Kansas, of course, right in the middle, because we don't know, we haven't specified anything. We don't know where we are. So I'm going to move over to Pennsylvania, and now I'm going to start moving in. So as the counties are popping up, I see Monroe County, and then I can just keep going further and drilling further and further in, start seeing some of the things that I'm looking for, like some street sign, some highway signs. I'm looking at 80, and then I can see 390. As I scroll in just a little bit more, I see 191 and 447 and all of these different places. And then I can see a little bit more as I go in just a little bit further. There we go. So now you can see some really specific streets, or Garden Ridge, and then you can see off, 447. And this looks like my place. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a click and select it. It's been highlighted. I could zoom out or whatever I'd like to do. From here, I'm actually just going to go to the table so I can see. Go ahead and click on the table first and switch to tables. Either one, actually, you can do it and click on the side. But this is showing me that one block number that I was looking for before I've done anything. Because I want to show you one thing, how to change and move things, transpose and hide. I think we've shown some of those things that we can do. If you were that, if you're that risky, you can go ahead and expose things and it drives me crazy with my eyes, or to go and look and maybe hide some things. Of course, we only have one line, so it's hard to hide. But what I like to just to show you is our print feature. Print is something we still are kind of struggling with, but you have some kind of basic ways of looking at, if you're looking at, just a few geographies, you can print this. If it doesn't show up, I like to go in over here and change the settings so that you can, fit it all on one page. So if that's really a need, that it's available there. But, I hear you, it is not the best looking there as possible. But we have some other ways of showing it, and we can show you that later. Wanted to do show from here is that you can go ahead and cut and paste and put them back in so that you don't have to do deep links or anything. Everything is URL based. That's one of the other reasons why it's so important for us to have those collections of geographies, because URLs have limits. And when you start clicking on all of these different geographies, it's just adding to your URL, and eventually it's going to stop. So you might get to 60 or 70. You think that you've added all of those, and it may have stopped because of, space limitations at 50, and you've lost some geographies and don't know. We've definitely heard them all in complaints and feedback. And so, definitely understand why we need those collections, but then also just to be kind of mindful of it. The good news is you get to cut and paste and be able to save those links very easily. Some people kind of use it as their own little lockers, how they get to things, but however you want to use, at least it's there and it's available. All right, so I'm going to go back in their next question. So we've talked about some different ways of using the single search bar, talking about how to drill down to find some mapping features, which I think is really nice. And then I'm going to show you the next one is advanced search, using across time and geographies. I want to start looking at some collections of some census tracts in Philadelphia County, but I'm looking for the Hispanic or Latino population for all those tracts. So I'm going to take a look, and then we can look at some other ways of doing that. Also, different what you're looking for when you're looking at race and ethnicity, and how you would kind of find some different ones. So we'll go into that really quickly. So click over here, and I'm going to clear everything. All right, so from here, I could type in Hispanic if I wanted to, and then pull up those filters, or I could just go to advanced search. And from here, I'm going to look at the few things that I have. So I wanted to go to, we know the topic is going to be Hispanic, the Hispanic or Latino. So I'm going to go down to the race and ethnicity. That's our first level topic. Always encourage you to take a look at what's underneath here, because sometimes you can't find something or looking for things, and they're just, categorized in a way that you wouldn't think about. I always think about fertility, and with the way that the ACS collects fertility data, we consider it more of like a family and living arrangement, but definitely people think of fertility as a health issue too. So, where would that be? Just go ahead, and sometimes you just have to, hunt and peck a little bit. So from here, I'm going to show you how to get that basic distribution, the Hispanic or Latino, but then I'm going to come back and see if you were interested in a specific, what we call a population, a pop iteration or pop group. If you're looking for one of those pop groups, if you were looking for, maybe the Puerto Rican population or some other specific Hispanic group, and then the characteristics of those. I'll show you how to do that in a second. So from here, I'm going to go to Hispanic or Latino. And then I'm going to click the box that just says Hispanic or Latino. That gives me the distribution. I see that it's on the left-hand side, that it's been added to my little filter box so I know that it's being applied. So next, I'm looking at all tracts in Philadelphia County. So I'm going to go to geography. Actually going to click this track button right here. And I'm going to go to Pennsylvania. And I'm going to scroll down to Philadelphia County, click on that. And then you see kind of the breadcrumbs that are added at the top. That helps kind of align you somewhat. But I'm going to choose this first, the all census tracts. So that's been added. I think that's all I was looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and search. And I see what's available here. So we have beyond just the P2, what we were looking before, and just the decennial data. We also have American Community Survey information, all of those different things, 175 tables. Just going to look at P2 just to be easy about it. I'm going to click on the table and I see it. Definitely really hard to look at tracks this way, even if I were to shut my, my filters. So I'm going to go ahead and click on maps. I think that's a great way of looking at these things. Let it paint for a second. And then you see the tracks. Now, the map is a great feature, but we really are still kind of struggling with kind of the usability of it. People, once they learn how to use it, seem to really like it, but it's not always intuitive. So we're doing a lot of internal tests to try to figure out better ways. So one of this that I'm not too fond of is this variable button, but this is what you have to do as a drop down in order to pick what variable you'd like to map. So if I'm looking at Hispanic or Latino, and that it can repopulate, or even if I'm looking at not Hispanic or Latino, however you're looking for. If you wanted to look at by race, you could do it however you'd like to do. Those things are available and are there. Then you can do things like change the color palette if that so moves you. You can also do data classes if you'd like to change those to quantile or equal interval. You can always go to this table, which I kind of like. I think we need to do a little bit more work with it, with putting the MOEs available, but at least it gives you one estimate across a geography, which I really, really like to be able to have to do some sort of comparisons. Click here, you can go to the full table that's available, not just this one estimate that we have mapped, but the base table from this. So that's available. Also some things here. You can go in and change the base map if you'd like to kind of see, like we had put it into the detailed map before. The style is some different ways that you can go in and do boundaries. Sometimes you'd like to see within boundaries, you can add those. And then one thing I like, I think we're still kind of working on it a little bit to flesh it out a little bit more, is that you can click on an area and you can see it kind of overlaps a little bit. So I think we're still working on that one, but it shows you specifically kind of identify what that is, which track it is, in what county, and that type of thing. So I think we're just starting to work on that, but hopefully we can get a little bit more. Hopefully that's the first step into being able to have something like an address search, which I know is something that data users have asked a lot for, to be able to put their address in and get the relevant information to come up, you know, block, track, county, but then also to be able to get this corresponding data that goes along with it, and which tables and that type of thing. So those are some things that we have. I'm actually going to go back. You need to exit the identify tool, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to click on tables to show you all of the tables that are available down here, but then also to show you just some things that we can do. We talked about printing it. Obviously, it'd be super tough to print something like this when you have this tiny little scroll that goes quite a ways away. But I'll show you a couple things. So this Excel and then CSV and Zip, they recently made some changes. I think we've gotten some feedback that we maybe need to do some editing to the labels of this, but just showing you what it is. So when you click on Excel or even CSV, it's just kind of the same, but slightly different. From here, you can go in and pull up the Excel and see a table view version of what we're looking at. So let me make it big. You can see the kind of fully qualified information. And then from here, it looks like a table. So, you know, it's obviously in Excel, and you know, you can save it as a PDF from Excel. So some of those things are helpful if you want to show somebody your data in a binder, or if you're trying to, you know, you go to your next door, you know, your office mate. If y'all are back in person, we're still not, but you know, ideally you could go and show them something, or even, you know, obviously saving it and sending it to them, but looks like a table. It kind of makes sense to our or organized minds. But if you're trying to use this for more data manipulation, something that's machine readable, you can go in and click on the zip file. The zip is actually what we consider to be the download. So you can add different ones if you're interested, and then download as a CSV. And that it's downloading. I'm opening it, and then it's however your browser opens things. And from here, I'm just going to pick the one with overlays just to show you that it's a single line. Not coming back. That's not right. Hold on, let me see. Maybe I downloaded the wrong one. Let me see. Anyway, I'll show you one that finally that works at some point. But, oh, this is the overlay one. 1 second, hold on. That's the metadata, the data overlays. There we go. Sorry about that. I have no idea what I did, but this one shows that each individual GeoID, one geography per line. So obviously this is, you know, perfect for doing your data manipulations through a computer. Shows you the census tract you're looking at, and then each individual estimates that come in, kind of fully qualified with the information that's there. Perfect for the machine, not so perfect if you're just kind of giving it to somebody and they're supposed to kind of figure it out from there. So two different ways, two different things, both equally as important, but just wanted to show you the differences. Not super different than what we've had before, but kind of the naming, and there's enough changes in how things have been, kind of the look and feel, that I just want to call out to you. All right, so the next one, get back to over here, is finding business data. So we wanted to look at looking for economic data for healthcare and social assistance industry for a zip code in Pennsylvania. So I was looking at one in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So let me go back over here. I'm going to go ahead and do an advanced search. And then I'm going to go to this codes button here. So you click on codes, and this brings up the different types of codes that we have using our economic data, products and services, commodity, material and fuel, even down to our EEO occupation codes that we've just had in the last several months. But I'm going to stick with the NAICS code and show you this, and show you the different things that we have available. We are looking at 62, which is healthcare and social assistance. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm just going to choose this 62 number because I want a very, very specific geography. I want a zip code. So you're not going to be able to find a 6-digit NAICS and a very, very, you know, small geography like a zip code. So let me show you that. And then in a second, I'll show you the different ways to do it if you're looking at, if you did want a 6-digit. So from here, I'm going to go to geography. And then I'm going to choose this 5-digit zip code because that's how you can do the economic data. Or I can actually go here to this search a filter, and I could put the number in right here. So I'm going to do 17601, press enter. There we go. And then I'm going to go down to this zip, because the ZICDAs are not what I'm looking for. Those are typically ACS data. So I'm going to go to the zip 17601 for Lancaster, PA. You see that it's been populated. And then I'm going to go and go from there. It's been populated. I can click this. Oh, let me shut this so I can click my search button finally. There we go. Now it pulls up the table I'm looking for. There's lots of these different tables for table years, but I'm looking for the county business patterns, or what we used to call the zip code business patterns. And I'm going to click on this latest one that we have available, and we can go from there, make this a little bit bigger. And you see that it's 62 code, and it shows this Lancaster, PA zip code. And you scroll over, and it has some basic estimates using the healthcare and social assistance, and going into like my all establishments, and you're getting some numbers. Once you're getting a little bit more specific, you start getting some ends where it becomes where it can't be released, the information couldn't be released, but you can get some basic numbers from there. Now, if you decide that you don't need, it's not as important to have that really specific geography, it's more important to have really specific NAICS. Let me show you how to do that really quickly. So I'm going to go back here, actually going to take out my Lancaster, and then I'm going to take out both of them. I guess it's the same thing as clearing either way. And I'm going to go back to codes, and I'm going to drill down to a more specific what I'm looking for 62, which is the healthcare and social assistance. And then I'm going to go into nursing and residential care facilities. And then I'm going to look even further, the skilled nursing. And then I'm just going to finally say, here we go. I'm good at 4. I could go even further if I was interested, whichever you want. I'll do down to the 5 NAICS. And then I'm going to do a geography, but I'm only going to choose Pennsylvania from there and see where it is, because, as y'all are quite aware, that the more specific the geography, limits the amount of people and businesses, and so sometimes getting that really specific is much harder. So it just depends. It's nice to be able to look at both, kind of see what you're willing to give and take for. If you really need those annual payrolls, you might have to roll up higher to Pennsylvania versus anything else. So just wanted to show you some different options with that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear it. And then from here, I wanted to just take a pause, if that was okay, Jennifer, and just see if there were any specific questions on data.census.gov that we could go over, only before we start going into the microdata access, just because it's a little bit different, and or we can just save into the end. I don't know if you have a preference or not.
We can wait for questions. We don't have any submitted just yet.
Okay.
If you.
Okay. That's fine. We can just keep going. But I didn't know if you had a bunch. I wanted to stop if you had a bunch. Okay, perfect.
Sure.
All right. So from here, I wanted to talk about the next kind of phase, which is we've been giving you tabulated data. So that means that data have been collected through our surveys, or even through our programs, like the 100% count of the decennial that have been, and then they're tabulated. So we don't give you all the information because it would just be too much. We give you the key estimates that people have asked for, either over time or what laws are needed for some certain things. So that's what the pre-tabulated means. So in most cases, it kind of hits on the money, what people are looking for, but we always have situations where people would like to look for 5-year-olds specifically, or maybe 13-year-olds specifically, because they're looking for, at-risk youth or different things. There's always different reasons that people are looking for something. And we go in and we might have school age population, which would be, 5 to 17, or we might have 5 or under, and we might have under 18, but we don't necessarily have something that's just 13. So that's some of the reasons why microdata is available using our public use file, just in case somebody is coming in, and it's definitely the minority. Most people are hit and get what they need from our tabulations that's available on data.census.gov. But for those people that are still looking for this microdata access is an option. So I want to show you two examples. One is just if you're looking for females with income of 40,000 or more in the United States, and then also looking for a single year of age of unmarried people, 21 to 30 in Pennsylvania. So you can see those are pretty specific. But let me go over some of the reason, the basics of microdata. So microdata is just another word for the PUMS file. The PUMS is the public use microdata that's released by several of our surveys, the American Community Survey, Decennial, the Current Population Survey. Different areas have this microdata that's released. The PUMS specifically means the public use microdata. So public use means that it is not personally identifiable information, that it is edited to protect your confidentiality. Even though these are single records of how one household answered a survey, it's been edited so that it's protects your confidentiality. It's also accessible, and that means that the free of charge of either data.census.gov/MDAT. We also have it through our microdata API, which is our application programming interface. It's what's the basis of everything on data.census.gov. Everything is pulling from our API, which is our data API, but we also have a microdata API that it's pulling from as well. And then you can also download these through the FTP site, which is something that's available. Many of these things are released for the FTP site for the redistricting data was actually released before it was available on data.census.gov. So people are able to go in and download, put it through their ASCII files, but it wasn't available in our MDAT just yet. So just showing you some different options that are available to get the data. And then microdata are the individual responses. And we talked a little bit about that. So an individual response on what we consider to be one record, how one household or one individual answered and their information specifically from that, which we don't see in our tables or our tabulated data because that has been aggregated and tabulated and weighted already. So when it says individual responses and that it must be tabulated and weighted by the user, that's really where our microdata access tool comes in, because, or what we call MDAT. So it's actually not providing new data. It's the same data that has been released and is publicly available on these FTP sites or through our microdata API. But what it does allow for you to do is that we help you create the calculations, creating these tables yourself, and also the weighting, applying the weighting. Just do a little bit more hand holding, which is actually a big deal, because I know when I've tried to use I have not, trying to the 5-year PUMS, tried to download it, and I wasn't able to. I didn't have enough storage space. So there's always, some good things that we're providing the storage, and creating those tables makes it just a little bit easier for people who are interested in doing this. So that's what microdata is. Now I'm going to go a little bit, kind of talked about it, but just want to make sure we're super clear. The difference between data.census.gov and microdata access. So data.census.gov, it does provide more precise estimates. We've been able to give you margins of error where applicable, using our replicate weights, where you don't have using the microdata access or using the PUMS. It does provide a wider range of data sets. Not all of our surveys or programs have PUMS or microdata available to it, released. There are fewer limitations to available geographies. So these are when you can go down to maybe, the block group and decennial, the block and decennial, and, down to the block group for some ACS tables. That's not possible with the PUMS data. It just has a larger threshold. We're looking more at nation and state, and some like an American Community Survey that allows for the PUMA area, which is areas of about 100,000, give or take. So definitely have to, you know, is this worth it to maybe raise my geography, or, you know, this is fine in order to get this more precise estimate that I'm looking for, maybe single year or a specific cutoff for an income. And then you don't have to have in-depth knowledge of variables. And that, I'll show you what that means once you get into the system, but it is true. You don't need to know what variables come, you know, are the ones that are sourcing the tables. The tables are just there. You just need to know the topic, right? So that's kind of the difference. It makes it a little bit easier on data.census.gov, but the microdata, now it does provide you with these custom estimates when a pre-tabulated census table is not available. You do have more historical data available. We have a lot of PUMs that are going back a lot, especially with the CPS, the current population survey, and that you have data sets that are not available on data.census.gov. Again, current population survey, we have some zip files, that type of thing. So those are some of the differences. Show you kind of really specifically some differences. Now at the top one, it says tabulated data. That's what's available on data.census.gov. What this estimate is showing you, that it gives us the number of computer and mathematical occupations of males in Maryland. It's the 121,160 males working computer or mathematical occupations. But what if you wanted to know the number of males in Maryland that were web developers specifically? So if you really are looking for those really specific numbers, this is where, you know, it's a great opportunity to use microdata access. It's clearly not available on the table. It doesn't go that low. And part of that reason is that when you look at tabulated data, we are tabulating across different geographies. It's not tabulated by each, it's not dependent on each, you know, the population of each geography. So if we're looking at something like county data, we have to account for, you know, Loving County in Texas and its 100 people versus, you know, Philadelphia County and some of those other really, really big ones that wouldn't have a problem with, you know, the bigger geographies. So that's kind of the basis of tabulated data and kind of the differences there. So if you are looking for web developers, something super specific, as long as you're okay with having the geography at Maryland, you wouldn't be able to find this on the track level. Whereas the aggregated tables or geographies, you could find that at maybe the county or the place or that type of thing. All right. Enough of that. I'm going to show you a real world example. So our example was females with income of 40,000 or more in the United States. So I'm looking at the current population survey using their annual social and economic supplements, this what we call CPS ASIC. So we're looking at that. And if I look down, I'm looking at the thresholds that they're cutting off for their distributions, their income distributions, and it goes to, like, you know, the 25,000 to 49,000 and then 50,000. It has these breakdowns, but it doesn't have 40,000 or more. Sometimes people really need that. Sometimes for different funding opportunities that they have, different reasons that people have that they're looking for something. So for here, they're just looking at the nation, or at the nation. So that's not an issue, and we can use the current population survey, but this does show that it's a great opportunity to go ahead and use MDAT because we've checked the table and the table is not already pre-tabulated for what we were looking for. So that's a big thing. We don't want to go ahead and use the microdata access and MDAT. You don't want to create estimates that have already been there. You don't want to create poverty for Pennsylvania. We've got that estimate very clearly available. And again, it's been run along with our replicate weights. When you're creating this, you don't have the calculations put in there for you of any kind of margins of error. So you just have to kind of, take that with a grain of salt. This is really for people that are looking for very, very specific things, or it's, for me, I've always found this to be a great way to do some research and find out where the trends are and what's really looking. We've done some work with work at home, which is going to be really very, very interesting in the next couple of years as people have been changing within COVID. But this is a great way of kind of looking at the different industries and occupations, what was looking for, in at home. So different ways of using things. All right, but I'm going to stick to my example and look for females with income of 40,000 or more in the United States. All right, so I'm going to click over here. I'm back on data.census.gov, the same thing. You can find it a couple things. It's up here, the top right, that says microdata, or you can scroll down and it says explore microdata. Either way, it'll take you to the same place. All right, from here, I get the choice of choosing which data set I'm looking for. So I'm going to scroll down and choose the CPS Annual Social and Economic Supplement, because I'm looking at US totals of income. So I want to use the current population survey. So I was looking for smaller things, smaller levels. I would look for using maybe the American Community Survey. But for here, I'm going to use the CPS. I have the option of different vintages. Might as well just choose the latest one, but I can change that if I was interested, and then just click on next. So first thing you see conceptually, it's very different. If you look here, we're looking, like we said, the variable level. So instead of topics and tables, you're looking at the variables that are going to create your tables. So a couple things you can do. This is always a great time to, if you are trying to find something from the current population survey, to go to census.gov and define those dictionaries, those data dictionaries, so that you know your variables kind of by heart and be able to figure out which ones you're supposed to use. So if you had done that, I can go into the variable and I know that I need person level income, and I know that it's P-top val, and I'm going to type that in and I see that it comes up, and I can click on this detail here and see that the values are the negative 99999 to 99999, which basically tells me that it's a string variable and I'm going to need to do a recode, but that's perfect. That's what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And once I click on it, you see this default display that comes up that says this is a continuous, just what I told you. It's a continuous variable and that you'll need to create a recode. Not a problem. I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you look down, actually, let me scroll down a little bit. So I've added the P-top val, but it's not down here in my data set, which throws me a little bit because it's not the same way. We're in the process of doing some updating to make it more streamlined with data.census.gov. So just show that it's not going to show at the side, but it is going to show right here in the data cart. So you see that we now have one. So just know that there. So the next thing I'm going to look at, because I want females, I'm going to take out this variable that I had. It's already been added, so it's already there, so we're good. And I'm going to go to, I'm just looking for the sex variable. I could go down and do it like an age and sex and see what comes up using the variables. I could also, instead of using that, I could also just type in, I know that part of the variable label has sex in it, so I can pull up that. But over in the far right where it says details is always a great thing to do a drop down and just see what your values are. So value 1 is male, value 2 is female. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and add it. And if you see, my data card has been added with 2. So what my question is female income 40,000 or more in the US. So now I need geographies. Now I'm going to click over the next is geographies. If you notice, it just says state. The US is the default. So again, don't let that throw you. I would love to be able to at least see that it's been added for the nation, but just know that it's already there. So we can click on to the next one, which is the data cart. And this is where you define your variables. You create those recodes that are needed. So for the first one, let's go to the easy one. You can choose all of this and not change it at all. And that means in your tabulation, you will have the returned results for male and for female. Or you can go ahead and I'm going to remove that and I'm just going to choose female. So male is not going to be part of my return. Either way, again, however, it's your table, however you like it. Now, and I don't have to create a custom group, it's already there. It's going to save my changes. Now I'm going to go to the p-val and I'm going to create my custom group. So the first thing I'm going to do is to click on create custom group. And then over here is a slider and I can slide it down to 39999, but I'm really not comfortable with that. So I'm just going to type it in. And there. And then at the top, I'm going to put less than 40,000. And then I'm going to save the group. And now you see the two options. I have one for less than 40,000 and then not elsewhere classified, which I guess is the best way that someone knew how to say there is no label. So I'm going to go ahead and edit it because I want a label. I'm going to just clear that out and I'm going to put 40,000 or more. Again, your table, however you'd like to do it. And I'm going to save the group. I see my two options. That's perfect. Then on the left-hand side where it says select variables, I see the p-val, but then I also see my p-val underscore RC1, which means that this is my recode. That's exactly what I want. And now I'm going to go to table layout. Okay. So from here, this first thing that says values on table cell, I'm going to click on it and I'm going to put counts. It offers you the average total person. I don't want that. I want the counts. So I'm going to click on the counts and then you scroll down that you have a small little table showing. But over here, you can choose how you want your tables to look. So you can put your recode in the columns if you would like, and you see how it quickly updates. You can move, the sex variable to female so that you have that coming back. You could also even put female on this one that says not on the table. And I'm going to tell you why you can do that is because you've only chosen female. So then it just becomes part of the universe. You're not necessarily missing anything. But again, you can always go back, see how it looks. I personally, grew up in the Census Bureau, so I really like my columns to have the geography on it, and then the my values to be on the left-hand side in those rows. So this is how I like it to look, but again, it's your table. So from here, it looks good. I got the count, and I'm going to click this button for view table. And if I scroll down, it gives you a total number, but it gives you of the 40,000 or more that we were looking for about 45 million. So interesting way of looking at it. If you look up here at the top, it says it's given the weight of the person level weight of the March supplement. That's a default. You could go in and change it to the family weight. I wouldn't suggest it, but this is a tool that allows you to manipulate the data that are publicly available. So we're trying to offer it to you in what's appropriate, but again, you can always make those changes. So just giving you, fair warning. All right, so I'm going to give you one other example. I think we had it up here. The next example we talked about was single year of age for unmarried people ages 21 to 30 in Pennsylvania. So the first thing we have to do is to check the tabulated tables and see if it's already been tabulated, because again, it has those really nice margins of errors attached to it, and we don't want to reinvent something like that when there's a more precise estimate that's available publicly. So we look and we see that it gives two age categories or age groupings of 20 to 24 and then 25 to 29, but it doesn't give the single year that we're looking for 21 to 30. So excellent reason for us to go and use the MDAT for the microdata analysis. All right, so I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna go ahead and click on and clear everything. It takes me back to the main page, and then I can click the microdata button and get where I need. All right, so I can use the 1 year, and I could scroll down. So I know I need to use the American Community Survey because of the marriage estimate, and that I'm looking at state. So I'm looking at 1 year. I could choose 1 year. I could choose 5 year. Just for simplicity, I'm going to use the 1 year. And then I'm going to select the vintage. I use 2019, but again, I can choose all of these other ones if I was interested. Click next. And then if you see, these are only the variables that are available for ACS. So before we had the only ones that are available for the current population survey. So this is one's for ACS. So what we need to look at, we need to get age, and look at ages sitting right here. So because it's, alphabetized. So here we go, age, just to make sure you see how it's available. I look at the details, and I see again that it gives me the string variable of 1 to 99, and then the 00 for the under 1. It's what I'm looking for because I want to do a recode in an individual year. So I click on that, and it tells me again that I'm going to have to do a recode, and again, that's fine. Next thing, make sure you go ahead and take it out of your variable just so it's easier to, because it's already been applied. You see right here on the data cart. Now I'm going to click on, because I know I want unmarried, but I'm going to go in, and if I looked up, I'd know that it's the MAR variable, but I'm going to go ahead and look through going down to the marriage, the marital status. I could find it. There we go. The marital status and marital history. I'm going to click on that, and it just groups the variables that are in that kind of that topic, that create that topic of marital status and marital history, and it's available. I see all of these different ones that are more specific, married or unmarried, or divorced. Then here's the MAR marital status, and I look at the details. And it kind of gives me what he wants. I wanted the unmarried, but it also gives me everything else, because again, as a researcher, I'd want those options to kind of see it. So I'm kind of interested in that one. So I'm going to click on this one. And again, you see that it's been updated. Select geographies. Now, since I'm using American Community Survey, I'm down to state, and I can also go down to PUMA level, and I'll show you how to do that. A couple of ways you can look, but the PUMAs, the way that they've been labeled, are really nice, that you can kind of have a basis of what counties that you're looking for, and you can, choose from there. But I'm going to just choose state. Show you Pennsylvania. Did I miss it? Yeah, I did. Here we go. Now, if you see Pennsylvania's down here, why it's not over here, I don't know, but it's not. But just know that you've added those things. Now I'm going to go to the data cart, and I'm gonna recode my variables. All right. Excuse me. All right. So for age, the age P, I'm gonna go ahead and click on this create custom variable. Then I'm gonna use the slider, or again, I can use the 20, but let's see how steady my hand is. To go to 20, I could do it. There we go. Or you could, like I said, do it. And then I'm also gonna check, and then check, under 1, because I want to include that. And then I'm gonna change my label to under 21. And then if you see, I'm gonna save group. So now you have my under 21 variable, and then you have all elsewhere classified, which is everything else. But what I want from this all elsewhere classified, the everything else, the 21 to 99, is I want an auto group. So this is, you could individually do each year, but I'm going to auto group and do the between 21 to 99 and then show which groups that I'm looking at. So I want to start at 21, but I want to end not at 91. I want to end at 30. I want to do groups of one single year, but you can see how you can change it if you want to do 5 years or something like that. And then I'm going to click on auto group and you see it's populated. So easy, I don't have to do it myself. All right, and then the last time, this right here, this non-elsewhere classified that has the 31 to 99, I'm going to edit that and put it as 31 and over. For 31, however you want to call it. And then it looks good. You can go back in and make some changes, however you want to do it. And then I see that it's my age P underscore RC1, my recode is named. Now I'm going to click on MAR variable. Again, I can choose all of these and it would show me, or I can just look at never married. However we want to do it, if I want to go that way, I'm in great. I can go to table layout. And again, since I'm using an age, it's the question of, do you want the counts or do you want the average age? I definitely would want the counts. And then I look down and I see my geography is not in my columns, and obviously that annoys me, so I'm going to move that. And then I'm going to move my age P to the rows, and let's see what that looks like, those individual ages from there. I can keep marital status because it's just unmarried, put that off the table if I'd like, and then go from here. It looks like they have those individual numbers. But, you know, as you can see, you can kind of change this however you want. So if you like it going across, you know, horizontally, you can do that. But I'm going to change it because that bothers me. So it's my table. I'm going to change it. So from here, you can go and then view table. It shows you that it's given you the PUMS person weight. And then from here, you have your individual estimates of unmarried people based on the year that they are. So fun to go in and look. You can also go in where it says customize variable. If you want to go back in to the MAR and, you know, I really want to see all of these different ones by those different ages, then you can go back in and view the table and you can see that, oops, but you know what? I'm still going to have to change my data, do the table layout is what I missed. So I have to take the MAR off of the my universe because I have the different years and I need to put them maybe in the rows or however I want. So now you have the individual years. You have the marital status by the individual years, however you want to do it. So different ways to look at it. It kind of is definitely something a little like the internet where you can jump down a rabbit hole very quickly. But, you know, again, I think that it's always great if you're looking for some specific, you know, very precise estimates. But then also as researchers, I think that it's a great way of kind of losing yourself in the data and, you know, playing around with it. So from here, I'm going to go in to the last few things before we take questions and show you just our resource page that we have really quickly. Let me look at it from here, sorry. So if you clear, easiest way to get to our resource page is this help button right here. If you click on this help button, this is where we have all of our information kind of housed in one place about data.census.gov. So whether it be, and then it also links to our developers page for the API and then also microdata access. So information about our navigational changes, but then also things like our latest releases, what's coming up, what's available, are any of our developmental updates that we've had, the things so that you can kind of follow if you're that interested as the releases are coming out, and then also guidance. So we have specific guidance for 2020 data, it says redistricting because it's all we had at the moment, but then we also well, obviously keep that updated for 2020. But this is just kind of in general guidance for data users. And then on this left panel, we have all of our how-to materials because everybody learns differently. We have webinars and then short videos. And then as soon as we have all of those, someone will say, I just want to see a PDF. So we try to make it so that people have what they need. If you'd like to kind of, fish and find your information yourself. We also have frequently asked questions, but then if you just would like to contact us directly, we would be more than happy to help you. So when you go back to data.census.gov, this help button gives our email address, which is census.data@census.gov. Also, another little plug right here is for our survey. So we have an annual survey. So if you took it last year or last time, love to hear from you again. But it's just a way that we kind of, and here's another little plug for it, it's just a way that we can kind of see how we're progressing, see if we're hitting the mark. What are the things that you're still looking for? We know we still get this through emails and conferences, but again, people like to provide feedback in different ways. So I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're interested, we have monthly newsletters, and as big things come out, we try to keep people updated. Here's also a link for those email updates. And then here's any information about our resource pages, but also anything with feedback. If you'd like any questions or have any feedback, please send us to census.data, and we would be happy to help you. I guess from there, I'll turn it back to you, Jennifer, if we have any questions.
Thanks, Kaneen. We really appreciate all that detail and all of those examples. It's very helpful. I don't see any questions so far, but let's just give people a few minutes if they'd like to type them in the Q&A. And I just wanted to mention to you that we've been obviously using data.census.gov and advanced search in our office for a long time now. The improvements are wonderful. And in addition, we have started really pointing our users to the map features and then also using the microdata tool. It is very easy to use, and we do have many data users who, as you mentioned, for Pennsylvania, they need some really specific data. So we have definitely used that recently. So thank you for all the updates.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad it's being used. That's great.
Absolutely. So I don't think we have any specific questions. If we want to wait another minute or two, is there anything else in general that you wanted to share? Or I know I can add the link to sort of the help, the general page that also has the email. But is there anything else? We're going to do sort of a follow-up email after the conference to all of our users. So other than those two links, is there anything else you would recommend I include for everyone?
No, I sent you, and I'm sorry I didn't do it earlier, but our PDF of the site, or excuse me, of the slide deck that has 100 slides of kind of the how-to. It's hard to what did she do? She was going so fast. So just don't worry about it. It's all in there. So at least gives you pictures of it and where it is. So yeah, I think that kind of helps walk through. And just another plug, if anyone has any questions, we're here. We're all researchers and data users ourselves in our area of outreach. And if anyone has questions, we just don't want you struggling. We'd love to hear from you. And I know Jennifer can help you and the rest of the team, but if it's anything that we can help you with, we'd be delighted to. So just give us a shout.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I think that's it. We don't have any more questions, so I'll be sure to give people access to the PDF of the presentation. Again, thank you for that. And then just links back to those other sites for general information and guidance. So thanks, Kaneen. And thank you for joining us yet again. We appreciate you coming back.
Anytime. I love it here. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us today, and we hope you found the presentations informative. As I've been noting, we'll make the presentation slides and the recordings available, and we will send out a note with links to the areas that the presenters have noted throughout the day with the email addresses to contact them. So if you have any questions about today's conference, please reach out to us at the Data Center, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.